Well, it's that time of year again. And as you can see, I'm fasting, Islam style. When most people think of fasting, they think of not eating. They think of abstaining from food. But in Islam, aka opposite world, fasting means gorging yourself with food multiple times per day. According to scholars, Ramadan is Arabic for eating disorder. Vimto is now like the official drink of Ramadan. It's pure sugar. Think Vimto is the Arabic word for diabetes. Tastes like carbonated cherry pancake syrup. You may be wondering, David, why do you care about this trans fasting? If people who are gorging themselves with food want to identify as fasting, who are you to judge? Well, there are two main reasons I'm talking about this. One, Ramadan is destroying Muslims physically. And two, Ramadan is destroying Muslims spiritually. First, the physical. We don't need a prophet to tell us that filling your belly with horribly unhealthy food multiple times per day for an entire month every year is bad for you. There's a sharp rise in hospital visits during Ramadan, many of them due to digestive problems. There's a surge in uncontrolled diabetes cases because of Ramadan. Thanks to Ramadan, obesity is on the rise in Muslim countries. Gulf countries are now among the fattest countries in the world. But as long as they don't eat pork, it's all halal, am I right? Food retailers have to start stocking up at least a month before Ramadan in order to keep up with the increase in food sales. Food bills increase by 50 to 100% during the month of fasting. But it gets worse. Keep in mind that not everyone who's trans fasting can sleep all day. Some people have to go to work during the day after partying all night, but then they can't even have a sip of water while they're working, leading to a range of medical emergencies, heat stress, traffic accidents, and so on. But as long as they don't drink a beer, it's all halal, am I right? Productivity drops between 35 and 50% during Ramadan. Imagine being less productive while giving yourself diabetes and going into debt to pay for all the food you're shoving down your gullet. What a religion. Ramadan causes lots of health problems for trans fasting Muslims, but that's just the physical. There's also the spiritual. Muslims claim that they follow Jesus. They say, "We follow Jesus more than you Christians." Now, what they really mean when they say this is that they follow what Muhammad said about Jesus. They claim to follow all the prophets, but they're just following what one false prophet said about all the prophets. So at the end of the day, they're still following one false prophet and no one else. They definitely don't follow the Lord Jesus Christ, who was the all-time king of exposing religious hypocrisy. In Matthew 6, Jesus condemns religious practices that are meant to impress other people, acts of righteousness that are just for show. He talks about giving to charity and prayer, and then he says this about fasting. Matthew 6, verses 16 through 18. "And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." Notice, Jesus condemns fasting that's meant to be seen by others. If you're fasting in order to earn a reputation for righteousness, your reputation is the only reward you get, according to Jesus. Apart from that reward, your fasting is worthless. Imagine a religion that demands, as one of its 5 pillars of orthodox practice, an entire month of public fasting. It's not fasting in private. It's not fasting in secret. It's fasting that everyone sees and knows about and talks about. You're praised if you do it and blamed if you don't. you literally announce to the entire world that you're fasting. That would be bad enough. But imagine what Jesus would think of this public fasting if it weren't even fasting. Imagine the level of contempt Jesus would have for a religious practice of public fasting that isn't even fasting. In other words, imagine a religion that encourages people to pretend to fast and to praise each other for fasting, even though they're actually gorging themselves with food multiple times per day. Jesus criticized people who were actually fasting, but who wanted other people to know that they were fasting. He called them hypocrites, even though they were fasting. How much worse is it to want other people to think that you're fasting when you definitely aren't? It's a double hypocrisy. Hypocrisy for not actually fasting, and hypocrisy for wanting a reputation as someone who fasts. If you made a list of everything Jesus said not to do as part of your religion, and you rolled it all up into a giant ball, you'd get Islam. The main question that remains is, why is Islam like this? Why do Muslims eat more and spend more and waste more when they're fasting than when they're not fasting? Why put a mask of piety on extreme gluttony? The answer, I think, lies at the very heart of Islam. Islam doesn't teach people to control their desires. Islam encourages people, the men especially, to carry their desires to perverse extremes. But it only allows them to satisfy these desires within an Islamic framework, thus trapping people with their own desires and using these desires in the service of the religion. For instance, if a non-Muslim man goes clubbing regularly and has sex with 100 different women, Islam will condemn him as a fornicator. But if this same man converts to Islam and joins the jihad movement, he can marry 4 women and take home sex slaves after every battle and be perfectly righteous before Allah, even if he has sex with 100 different women. Notice, same desire in both cases, sex with lots of women. But one is acceptable and the other is unacceptable, based on whether it's advantageous to Islam. Likewise, if a psychopath goes on a killing spree, he's surely going to hell, according to Islam. Unless, of course, he goes on a killing spree as a terrorist attack for the sake of Allah as part of the Ramadan bombathon, in which case his violent massacre will earn him a one-way ticket to paradise, where he'll spend eternity deflowering virgins. The psychopath wants to kill either way, but Islam provides the framework for pleasing Allah while satisfying the desire. According to Muslim sources, the tribes of Mecca were violent, lascivious, and gluttonous. Muhammad didn't change their behavior when he forced them to convert to Islam. He made their desires even more extreme and presented them with only one way to satisfy them: the Islamic way. When you can take the lowest, most animalistic part of people and convince them that it's the best part of them and that they're serving God by killing and raping and shoveling food in their faces, you've just made yourself an army. Hence, the rapid spread of Islam. Should we be surprised that Ramadan is a month-long series of gluttonous feasts that Muslims call fasting and view as one of their highest religious duties? Not at all. When Muhammad is your prophet, you don't have someone who can give sight to the blind or raise the dead. You only get one miracle. What's the one miracle in Islam? It's this: Islam takes behavior that's normally regarded as selfish and harmful and miraculously transforms it into the will of God.
You just backfired on me.